Welcome to our 88th podcast. Today we're talking about case studies in successful change management or organizational development. What's one thing you could do now to help your change management or organizational development initiatives succeed? Keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces.
Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and I'm joined by my co-host and co-author and co-everything else, Ben Kleinman. Hey, Ben, how are you?
Hey, Rich. Hey, everyone.
So, Ben, you had this idea. I love this idea, right? I mean, we talk about storytelling all the time, but telling some stories, giving some case studies about some of the change management and organizational development projects that we've worked on in our careers. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it might be neat to, as we start to get towards the end of 2025, it's a natural time to think about lessons learned and year in review and year ahead and things like that. And one of the things that I've found is helpful to look back over the year, and it's just a nice given point of time, but it could be a quarter, it could be 2 years, depending upon what your planning effort is. But just to look back and say, what are some themes I'm seeing? What are some interesting takeaways that maybe I've learned this year that I hadn't quite experienced the same way in prior years? And so I was thinking, let's use some case studies as a way of exploring that. And case studies are always fun to talk about. Everyone likes to understand kind of the situation and what was going on and why this is unique and what was the big takeaway and the lesson learned and all
Sure.
that. And how did you, the change practitioner, come in and save the initiative, and sort of that whole hero's journey of the change practitioner? Or how did you, the org development mastermind, come in and reshape the organization, and now it's just thriving and taking on the world? And so maybe I thought that might be
I
interesting to
love it.
talk about today.
That's great, man. And I will say,
Yeah.
I've had certainly my share of successes, but there have been a few. I wouldn't necessarily. No, I'm going to say it. I've had a few flubs. I've had a few failures, too. At that time.
Well, I think that's the beauty of this, is we've all had experiences that did not go according to our best wishes or according to plan, or would be sort of outtakes on the highlight reel of professional career
Right.
life. And those are things maybe that are equally valuable, or if not more valuable, to learn from and talk through. And certainly there's not this past year, but there's one that I was speaking with some students at Kellogg's grad school. They had sort of a networking evening for alumni and current students, and one of them asked me about lessons learned. What are some things that I have taken away in my years since
Sure.
graduating back in the Stone Age? And one of the things that I thought was that there was an example of, and this is maybe getting into some of our case studies, there was an example of a project I was on where I was trying to help the transformation lead, the project lead, really organize a whole lot of different activities within the project. So you can think of multiple work streams with lots of different activities across the business.
Sure.
And this is for a major pharmaceutical company. So you can think of things like the traditional finance, HR, product delivery that any company is going to have. But then for pharma, there was also the regulatory and the research and development and all the manufacturing that's just also unique to the world of pharmaceuticals. And so he was looking for someone who, in his words, could see around corners. And I realized after trying to do that, that I had no idea what
Oh,
that meant. And after a while, we just realized that I was not the right fit for that project. So I exited that, and it was not really fun at the time. It was really difficult because I still don't think I understand what that means, and how, as a consultant, I would come in if someone says to me today, Ben, we'd like to hire you. We're doing this massive change. We need you to be the eyes and ears on the ground and in the helicopter above the project, and we need you to see around corners. I have no idea what that means. I mean, does that mean I just bring my magic 8 ball and in the back
right.
room sort of shake out what today's plan is going to look
Sure,
like? I
sure.
mean, I don't know. If I had that skill, I would probably be maybe not Warren Buffett, but like Warren Buffett mini me. It just so that kind of thing, I think I realized there are certain clients, not company clients, but people that hire me to do
Hmm.
work that I'm going to work better with, and then I'm going to be a better consultant
Sure,
to than other
sure.
clients. And I think it was that kind of a lesson. And so I know that's not this year, but it it kind of came up this year and reminded me of a prior experience. But that's the kind of thing, just to your point, where we can learn as much from, let's say, failed experiences or experiences where we learn something, and hopefully we learn it
Sure.
quickly and only have to learn it once, than projects that go just swimmingly
Right.
well.
Well, that reminds me of, I think it was earlier this year. Um, I was in an OD, organizational development, haha, first acronym today. Um, so in a group of, it was actually called the OD chat group. It was done by Alan Landers, who um, does the Drucker School certification program there.
Yeah, and he's been somewhat of a mentor to
Yeah.
you over the
Uh-huh.
years, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. For about two
Okay. So
years or
this is
so.
friendly
Yes.
territory,
Right. Yeah.
roughly. Okay.
And he had one of the developers of Dialogic OD. So Jervis Bush and Robert Marshak, right? They're the two people who came up with this discipline of organizational development that is called Dialogic, right? And but one of the things that Robert was talking about that goes along with what you were saying is finding clandestine behaviors, finding those, like looking under the rocks and trying to find, these hidden behaviors that happen within the organization. And I that's a tough thing to do, because how do you how do you how do you look around, like you said, look around the corners and or with and put on your spy gear or whatever to see how that's going on. um I was earlier this year, a little later that last year, earlier this year, I was in a project where we were documenting, it was change readiness, right? So we were getting ready for a new enterprise resource planning system, ERP system, um, to be put into this engineering and manufacturing firm. And that was part of what we did, but it wasn't part of the scope of the project, if that makes sense, right? It was a byproduct of of what we were doing, because we came in to document processes, and then do some of the change readiness with regard to helping people understand what their place was, and then the org design and how that might have needed a change for all of this. But in the process, we found all kinds of, like, little behaviors, little tools that people made, and it was helpful for their change process to realize, oh boy, we not only have this legacy system that we have to wean everybody off, but we have all these other little tools that we have to also deal with to get out of here.
And and so those were some of those little rocks that you were looking under, or finding all sorts of that organizational
Right.
stuff that's there that you realized, oh, this is good discovery. This could be a big risk or an impact to our change
Right.
readiness.
So as my team would be doing this, so it was me and a couple of business analysts that I was leading on this. We, as we were having discussions and having dialogue, right? We would find this other stakeholder would enter into the equation. Why? We didn't know. So what? So there begets another conversation with that person, and so on and so forth. And so you start to pull together all these cross-functional relationships that people have, and that's helpful to have. But boy, does it make it complex, right? Like, and how do you predict behavior
Yeah.
with that in mind? It's kind of it's a tough thing. So I feel for you, man.
All of oh man, all of those network connections and who has the power here, who has the power there, how does that change depending upon which group they're in or what subject they're talking about? One person might be the expert for something, but not be the expert for
Right.
another thing. And how do you know all that and track all that as an outsider coming in? That's really, really hard stuff to pick up on, but that influences the tone of a change, the style of a change, the speed of a change, the ability of a change to actually get anything
That's right.
changed. It's 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 crazy sometimes to see how that exists. I mean, you've talked before about how you've done a lot with looking at networks as part of your MBA studies and whatnot, and I think that's just the tip of the iceberg that you can do in a classroom situation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's amazing how you get out into the real world and you see how these things play out and how some of this has
None of it's
been
textbook, man.
baked
You
in.
know.
Oh, none of it's textbook, but some of it has just been the way things have been at a given company for years. And to try to
Right.
unpack that and
For
untangle
sure.
that in the space of 3 months or a short amount of time as you're just doing some discovery work to prepare for a change. Woof, you're
Yep.
just scratching the
Yep.
surface
Absolutely.
there. I mean, there's a lot you're not going to uncover until you start really getting into that change. Like you say, you'd be putting in that new system and telling people this is the only system. And you've talked in other shows about how you've done that, and people have kind of kept their little cheat sheets and workarounds hanging on to them tooth and
For sure.
nail, and how even then you still have to be very, very disciplined about weaning people
Right.
off that.
Right. Yep. Well, Ben, we're about at time where we need to take a quick break. But when we come back, let's hear another story you got. Right on.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
We'll be right back.
In a world where leadership needs clarity and action, and HR gets left out of the loop, one hermit crab steps in to save the day, only to be shut down by management. From the creators of Hermie the HR Hermit Crab and the Harmonious Workplaces podcast comes a new shell-shocking adventure, Out of the Loop into the Fire, or HR Hung Out to Dry. This book blends workplace satire with evidence-based lessons, reminding leaders that culture, trust, and people strategy don't exist as extras. They form the foundation of lasting success. Whether you work as an HR professional, a leader, or just someone who has survived a few too many staff meetings, Hermes stories will make you laugh, think, and maybe even change the way you see your workplace. Purchase Hermie the HR Hermit Crab, Out of the Loop, Into the Fire, or HR Hung Out to Dry, now available on Amazon and Ingram Spark. Shop now at harmoniousworkplaces.com/Hermie HR Crab. That's harmoniousworkplaces.com/Hermie HR Crab.
Huh. Big change of Fred.
And we're back. All right, Ben. So we've had two stories that we've shared so far. And by the way, you'll find some case studies, some of what we're talking about here, over on our website at harmoniousworkplaces.com. I think it's just it's slash about slash case studies. But if you go there, you'll find some of the stories that we're sharing today. Maybe not all of them, but go check that out.
Yeah, no, it's a great resource, and it shows you the breadth and the depth of things that the three of us have worked on over the
Yeah.
years. Um, just really impressive to see that.
So,
Not having any dog in the fight there at all, but just sort of saying that that's a lot of great
yeah, sure,
experience and a lot of diverse
sure.
experience too across many industries and types of projects
Right
as
on.
well. So
And most of
very, very
your
nice.
experience has been in healthcare, pharma, that realm.
Yeah, I'm probably the one skewing us in lacking breadth
What do you
and
mean?
depth and
That's
or maybe contributing to
that is some
depth.
of the most complex and
Well,
rich environments, man.
I might have a little bit more industry focus than you and Cheryl in terms of breadth, but certainly depth goes pretty deep in the healthcare writ large. So yeah, pharma, biotech, med device, med
Mm,
tech, hospitals, health systems, all that kind
right
of
on.
stuff. So yes,
So, Matt,
that's my swim
yeah,
lane.
do you have any stories in that tech space, in the med tech, biotech type of thing?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of how to sort of frame it and spin it because there was there was um, there was this idea that I've been thinking about because of some changes that have been on more recently that have been more with the biotech world, so kind of more in the pharmaceutical making a
Oh yeah,
drug
yeah,
type
sure.
space as opposed to medical technology making a
Right.
device type
Okay.
of thing. There's bridges though between those because a lot of times medical drug companies will also make some kind of
To
device to
deliver
deliver
it,
the
sure.
drug. So you think of an injection pen or some sort of syringe where you can inject something, or a way that you will take a specific drug that they're manufacturing. So there's it gets very fuzzy very
Sure.
quickly. Um, but one of the things that, and this is getting to answer your question, I promise. The thing I'm thinking about is how the leader of a given change, and this is not necessarily the sponsor, the person, I think of the sponsor as the person who is the most senior person who's essentially paying for it and responsible for getting the outcomes of this change, but they're not necessarily in the weeds of the change or even at a high level working on the change. They're sort of gaining approval for it at the C-suite level or at the very highest level, and they're gaining the resources. They're getting alignment on resources. The people are going to be there. The physical resources are going to be there. The financial resources are going to be there. All of that kind of stuff is going to be there, and then they're on the hook for realizing the benefits of
Sure.
that change. The day-to-day kind of ownership of that change, the change lead, ownership of developing the strategy, making it happen, all of that. That's where I'm sort of thinking that change
Hmm.
lead. The what I'm getting towards is the personality of that change lead seems to have a very strong influence on the personality of the change
Oh, sure.
project.
Okay.
And I'm curious if you've seen that as well. But I where I go back to is um, for the med device project that you were asking about, or the medical technology project that you were
Hmm.
asking about. There was a change lead that was sort of very fact oriented. This is a think of something very engineering focused. So you have a lot of engineering mindset,
Sure.
very fact
Sure.
driven, very process driven, very sort of we do X, then Y, then Z. We run these experiments. We kind of conduct everything. We gather lots of data. And so very factual, very
Compliant.
precise in that
So
way.
compliant,
Com-
yet probably some investigative quality to this as well.
yeah, very methodological and innovation within structure, if that
Sure.
makes sense. And so the change project had a lot to do with how do we take a device and build the next version of the device in a very structured kind of way that I think made it very easy to see all of the complexities, but made it very hard to navigate some of those complexities because it didn't allow for a lot of that more human
Yeah,
side
yeah,
and that sort of personality. And then there's also you're trying to scope unknowns and bucket those unknowns into what were ideally very time bracketed windows. And because of all the complexities of software and physical hardware and doing things that were so new that you just didn't know if it would work,
sure.
would this device be able to run this number of analyses using this amount of reagent and this amount of precursor, and how would all that load in the device, and will all the software work and all the buttons work in the time that you want it to work? All of that was being essentially written from
Mm,
scratch. And I think they didn't bake in enough cushion to understand that there's so much new here. We're playing with software, we're playing with hardware, we're playing the interface between the two, and not really realizing all the things that could go wrong in terms of trays moving in and out and not loading, or pipettes not pipetting, and all of these things running out of reagents, having to restock reagents. How do you handle that mid flow? I just think that they were a little too proscriptive based on being a bunch of engineers about how to
yeah.
respond to
No, that
that
makes sense. I mean,
and how to plan for that, and sort of planning like everything will be known, even unknowns we're going to bucket a little bit for, but they didn't allow for, I think, as many unknowns, if that
yeah,
makes sense. And I don't want to get all Rumsfeldy in there, but it just seemed like there was yeah, some of that. And then just to round that out, being on a different change at a more of a drug making kind of company where the change lead was super knowledgeable, but just not as structured planning
okay.
wise. And that change was really great, discovering and bringing people along and learning from people and wanting to learn and discover, but there wasn't as much structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where, as we started getting a little bit more into the weeds and having to realize that there had to be a there was no way. It was sort of like there wasn't a plan to get from the
Sure.
there, and that was part of what we were having to do a little bit more heavily than we might have expected. Is that we really had to sort of say, nope, nope, nope. We do have a delivery date. We do have to kind of hone this down. We do have to get people to start really making some decisions. And yes, there's some time sensitivity here, and yes, there's some budget. We can't just keep doing this forever, and all of that. So just I was thinking about these kind of different personalities and how those affect a given
Yeah,
change, and
yeah.
it's just
It's
wild. So I know I've
no,
been
no.
talking for a long time, but what's been your
No,
experience
it
there?
sounds great. I mean, from a personality kind of trait um point of view, right? I mean, it sounds like the in the first example, you've got somebody whose preferred work style maybe from, and I'm talking, I'm going to bring in the Holland Reasec, or what do you call that? The standard SDS. This is their preferred work style, right? So their work preference looks and sounds to me like they are on the conventional, investigative, realistic end of things, as opposed to the other one, which may be more on the artistic, social, and enterprising, right? I mean, stark differences in this. One, super risk adverse, right? That realistic and investigative one is very scientific, wants to make sure that we're compliant, and that we are not deviating from quality, not just the voice of the
Very
customer, but
structured.
our
Yeah.
our regulations and all that. And the other one being innovative, right? Fostering innovation, right? So, and then from a like an ocean standpoint, the big five: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness and neuroticism, where the one likely, if we look at like just the neo, which is the neuroticism, extroversion, and openness, probably pretty high on the neuroticism. The openness is fairly low, and the extroversion's probably pretty down there too, right? Where the other one, on the opposite side of the spectrum, right? The emotional stability may be there because we got to get this done. The openness is there. So, yeah, I mean, I there that's quite a stark contrast, man. I mean, I'm not. I wouldn't know unless we actually went through a battery of tests or whatever. But that's what it sounds like you've got there. So for whatever that's
Yeah.
worth.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
fascinating stuff, but just this idea, which I don't think I had sort of thought through as concretely as just till recently, this idea that the change lead has such a strong influence on the the style of the
Yeah.
project and how the project will get to its
Sure.
endpoint. And it'll get there, and it'll get there just fine one way or the other. But it's just interesting how it sort of manifests itself and how the project starts to take shape and
Mm-hmm.
form. And then as an external practitioner coming in, how can you influence that and how can you work with that, but also guide that and help that
Right.
along in ways that are complementary, but then also in ways that might help challenge that work style in a healthy, positive, psychologically safe
Right.
way to get those complementary needs met. So a lot of times if you have a project that is very structured and rigid and full of those compliance needs, there does need to be a balance for allowing people to be people and allowing innovation to have the space to innovate and learn
Right.
from failures, and how you blend that in versus on the other side allowing for how do you bring in a little bit of that structure
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit of that rigor, maybe, that beyond that sort of exploratory phase, you need the discovery, you need the exploration, all of that. But then at some point you have to say, okay, this is a go, we're going to
Mm-hmm.
do this. Then you have to start really becoming a little bit more thoughtful about how you plan
Sure.
that out. So it's not just kind of fuzz and
Right.
fog the
Right.
whole
Well, especially
project.
when it comes to delivering pharmaceuticals, there shouldn't be any fuzz or fog.
No, and to be sure, there was never any risk to fuzz or fog about making the
Right.
pharmaceutical. It was this was more of a organizational structuring
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
exercise, but it was people tend to like certainty about where a project is going, an initiative is going. They
Yep.
like to understand that there's a defined goal there. And I think having that really nailed down in terms of what it is, how we're going to get there, who's involved, what's the change, what's the impact to me as a person in this potentially new
Mm-hmm.
organization. People like understanding that. And at some point, you have to kind of lock
Sure.
that down.
Sure. Yeah. It makes me think. I was just teaching yesterday. We were learning about
I
leadership.
was going to say you seem very very sort of
Oh.
professorial this morning, talking about dialogic OD and all these different sort of OD theories and personality theories
Well,
and whatnot, and just like riffing them
when
off
you
left and
came
right.
up with this,
You just came out of
right?
class,
Well,
didn't you?
that's just it. When you came up with this idea to do this, and I got the notes yesterday. I'm like looking at them and looking at the case studies, and I'm like, oh, okay. And it's remarkable when you go to bed, like what the brain does. Yeah, I woke up this morning. I'm like, oh, yeah, that might be something to talk about. Also, yeah.
Well, I'm glad the brain works for one of us.
Right on. Well, let's do this, Ben, because I think we're about that time where we're going to take a second break. But
Yeah,
I do have a story I want to share. It's kind of
love it.
it's actually a bit of a failure story. Um, but there's
That's okay.
a redeeming quality that comes out of it. So when we come back, I'll share that. Right on? All right.
Awesome.
We'll be right back.
Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible. We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. At Harmonious Workplaces, we believe work should provide purpose, satisfaction, and growth. We empower people to thrive by fostering environments where individuals can find meaning in their work and organizations can succeed through thoughtful, well-executed strategies. We're committed to making work better for the people who do it and the leaders who guide them. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.
And we're back. So, Ben, we've been sharing some
Yeah.
case studies this morning, right? Or
Case studies, lessons learned, things like that. And you were just teeing
Right.
up a story that you were going to share that may not be quite a success per se, but a success in that you've learned something quite valuable. So that's always helpful.
Yep.
We
So,
like to celebrate learnings.
well, there's certainly some learning here, and we sometimes we learn through pain. this this is a recent project, um, and basically I was working with a firm. They had this piece of software that I didn't really know, right? But it was not that hard to learn. It's very similar to other types of software that operates a similar firm, and um, nobody was using it. They were all creating their own pieces. A small organization, but they've been around for quite a few years. Right, had a pretty tight staff, um, but boy, just nobody was using software. Nobody really knew how to use it. They didn't understand why they had to use it. So we had some people who were like not bypassing software altogether and writing things down on paper, and then stuffing things into envelopes and just throwing the envelopes wherever they need to be. And they knew where it was, but nobody else did. It was kind of nuts, right? Um,
That's crazy.
yeah,
And so just to clarify, this is software that had been officially rolled out
officially rolled
and
up.
the
Right,
organization was told this is our software, or this is what
right,
you're meant to be using. And so all of that
right.
was communicated and there was training opportunities were provided and things like
Yes.
that.
However, the
Okay.
training and all of that,
Gotcha.
I found out nobody really went through it. Nobody went through the online training, and then when they had the onboard and everything, it was not delivered by somebody who um, was from that company or knew the software or whatever. So it was a problem. So I got to know the software enough to where I could train on it. I put together a training program, an online training program. We got everybody trained up. I did some individual coaching. Here's where things get wonky, right? We got everybody on board. They start to use the system. I'm tracking progress and all that, and they're like, this software is just for the birds. We hate it. We hate every little bit of it.
Oh
Yes.
no.
So all this that we did, right? And they were like, well, we're going to go to the competitor because the competitor is, and I don't think it was a bad move. Actually, I think that was right on because, software has a tendency to change over time, right? And this one happened to go through a couple of different acquisitions and was at a stage where they were going to sunset it within a couple of years anyway. So it was a good move to the competitor.
And so you're talking about moving this to a different software, right? You're not
Right.
talking about people leaving the company to go to a competing
That's
company
exactly right.
in that same industry. You're talking about the company deciding the software we rolled out, people are not using it.
Right.
We're going to change to a new
Right.
software and roll that new software out within this company.
Exactly. Right.
Okay,
Now, the
gotcha,
nice part
gotcha.
about,
And so
yeah, yeah. So it was lukewarm adoption on this software to where it was
it's better than
which is better than
revolting.
nothing, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but then we're gonna remove the whole thing and put this other thing in there. However, the nice, kind of the sunny side of all of this was that the new software had a lot of corollaries to the old one, right? The processes and the user experience, the UX of it was different to some extent, but the basics of putting in contacts and putting in cases that they were the projects that they were doing, um, and document storage and all of those things, right? Managing calendars, all of that had the skills that we had them learn for that other piece of software translated very well to this one. And in fact, the UX was so much better on the new system that the adoption, frankly, I didn't have to be there. they they uh, they were able to move everybody into this without having somebody else, a third party like me, come in. It was all pretty much done with the vendor. That said, I am engaged with them to do some more change management work, moving from a Google workspace to a Microsoft environment, um, which involves some level of uh, change, right, and how they're going to adapt their processes and all that. But it's interesting that for me anyway that even though we had this software rollout that was really, essentially a failure, if you can pick up the pieces from and the learning aspect of it and translate the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we've accumulated, right? Those KSAs that we've accumulated, and we can transfer that over to something else, right? We can be very adaptable. There, there you go.
That's great. That's great. That's like a nice takeaway in terms of turning something that was not going so well, maybe even a train wreck, into a nice positive
For sure,
outcome.
for sure.
Yeah, it kind of almost makes me want to think about, if you're going to roll out software, roll out something that is absolute garbage, and then take that away, and then give them the software that you were thinking about rolling out originally, and that will
Oh
be
my
so
God.
much better
You,
than. I mean, it's sort of like mind games for people, and that's really twisted to think about. But
that's beautiful, Ben.
you know, the bait
Right.
and switch. Yeah.
Yeah, make it
Okay.
make
There,
it feel
I've just lost us like eight hundred
right,
thousand
right.
clients.
Yeah.
So
Oh my God, what are these guys gonna do to us? Right. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, for me, whenever I'm thinking about, like, if I'm ever part of a sometimes I brought in during the discovery phase of a software rollout, right, to help prepare for its rollout, right, and the change management for that. Sometimes I may be brought in for the selection of the software, and I like to think of like what are the competitors and what are the alternatives, because from a risk management standpoint, if
Mm-hmm.
this, you know, I mean, even Oracle at some point is going to have an end of life, right? At some point, right? Salesforce is going to have some end of life, and
Yeah,
I've
they
seen
all will. Yeah.
Salesforce sunset certain things almost every year. There's some element that gets eliminated, and you have to,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
move everybody over to the new system, right? So selecting something where all the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we've learned on this one system will translate well to the other one. I think that's at least how I try to think
Mm-hmm.
of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Compatibility, not only with
I
this,
think
with
to be a
the, yeah.
no, so I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was just going to say, yeah, I just think of like compatibility with the systems, not, and it's not just the IT systems, but the processes and the people-oriented systems. There needs to be a level of compatibility and integration with all that.
Yeah, exactly. The organizational systems
Right.
that the IT, the computer system is just one part of all the other wheels and cogs in what makes an organization go. And
Right.
so having that compatibility amongst all of them, but the ability to swap out one cog and put in a different cog um, as easily as possible can be very helpful and lead to some of that adaptability and resilience that we've talked about many,
Oh
many
yeah,
times before, especially
for
recently.
sure.
But I think to be a little bit more serious, less facetious than I was about rolling out junk software, but it seems like there's a real benefit though to having the folks that you are working with, the users of this particular system, understand their world well enough that they could easily flex from one system that did things a certain
Hmm.
way to another system that does more or less the same kinds of things in a slightly different
Right.
way. It, and being able to make that leap relatively
Hmm.
easily, I think is very helpful,
Yep. Yep.
and that gives them a really nice, and you at that at work you're doing with them, a really nice foundation to be able to say, look how well we jumped from that one software to this
Sure.
other software. Now we're doing this other leap from Google to Microsoft. We can do that, no
Exactly.
problem. We know how
Yep.
to adjust, and so building that learning and that sort of change muscle and celebrating that change muscle for this client, I think is a huge
Yep.
win.
Yep. And I like to put it sometimes in the framework of each of these each of these bigger pieces of software, right, the Salesforce or HubSpot or Microsoft to Google or whatever those are, they have their own jargon and their own basically culture that your organization needs to adopt. Um, which is one of the reasons why I like to use like their learning tools to introduce everybody to this is the way that they talk. This is like Salesforce has their cute little bunnies and their trailhead and everything is like outdoorsy themed, right? Um,
Okay.
whereas like HubSpot, which is another CRM, customer relationship management tool, right? That's out there. Theirs is how do I put this? It doesn't use the cutesy stuff, right? But they speak in like uh, it's less jargony and a lot more loose, I guess, is what I would say, right? Informal to some extent, right? Um,
Okay.
and to introduce people to how they introduce the software, right? helps to bring the way that they talk to each other about the software easier, right? Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
the
Well, you're using the terminology from
terminology,
that.
the
Yeah.
flow of communication, the way that we talk about it, coming from their culture and entering that and integrating that into the culture of the organization has been something that's been very successful.
Yeah. That's great. They embracing that has been, it sounds like, really helpful for that
Mm-hmm.
organization.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like that's a good tool for you to help people embrace that sort of change, is to use the framework that a given software has, that the company that develops and delivers that software, that they've built up around. Here's how we think about our tool. Here's the style that we have. Here's the terminology that we use. Having people kind of get used to that and embrace that seems like it's very helpful.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, Ben. Anything else? You got any other
Good.
tidbits or
No,
stories?
that's I think that's a great success to leave it with.
Cool. All right. Well, if you want to see more stories, go to harmoniousworkplaces.com. Check out the case studies. We've got quite a few of them up there, right?
Yep. Yeah, there are quite a bunch, and that's on harmoniousworkplaces.com. Go to the About
Mhm.
section, and you'll
The
see
drop
a
down for the.
page
Yep.
with just tons of case
Yep.
studies there. Yeah, and you can always ping Rich or Cheryl or me. There's a form on the website if you want to learn more about what we do and how we can help and apply all of these great lessons and
For
learnings
sure.
to your
Right on.
organization.
All right. Ben, you want to take us out today?
Until next time, friends, make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode.